Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host, as always. And this week, to discuss a rather disappointing 1-1 draw at Fir Park on Wednesday night, is my good friend, Adam Thornton. Adam, thank you so much for joining me. I know it's going to be tough to motivate ourselves for this one after a disappointing draw yesterday, but also, I think, taking into account our title rivals getting a couple of last minute winners. It's been a tough last few days.
Yeah, it has. I think we knew that was going to be a difficult game, and yeah, those margins in our game and in the other games don't exactly help. We have been on the other side of that, I guess, in this little mini revival that we're going through. Let's just wait and see how things end up with that, I guess.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I was watching the Hearts Hibs game on Tuesday night. I'll be honest with you, I didn't think it was a great game of football. I don't think there was loads of quality. I was pretty surprised as our game was unfolding that Livingston were able to get themselves back into the game at Parkhead. But my more immediate pressing concern just now is a lack of ruthlessness from a Rangers team that seems to show up at times and gives you a little bit of a hope, a little bit of a sprig of hope that we can try and do something fairly consistently, and then it seems to revert to type, Adam, and especially when we look at away games, we got the benefit of an early goal, early doors, which I think calmed a wee bit of nerves. Certainly for the supporters and the people I was talking to as the game had started, we wanted to get a positive introduction to the game, which we did, and then we seem to do that thing that this Rangers team's been guilty of for a good wee while now, where we get the first goal and it almost seems as if it sets us back. We allowed Motherwell to be able to come back into it, and we just did not press to be able to get that second, which I think for me would have killed the game and secured the 3 points.
Yeah, and I think the manager is pragmatic, particularly in these games, and that is what everyone has wanted, I guess. So we have to be fair with that. But there is a pattern now. Maybe not Tannadice, as that was a bit of a wild game, and we did create quite a bit there. But certainly Tynecastle, Easter Road, and then Fir Park. There's a pattern there where we're just not really in the game, relying on our admittedly very much improved defence. Um, to see us through and set pieces. And I think that's been the two main big factors of this run. Everyone has been complaining about the lack of attacking quality, so um, it sort of makes sense. This side of the window, I have to admit, I certainly hope we would see at least one or two of the newer players start the game. Um, I was a bit surprised at the reaction to the transfer bids for Chermiti and Gassama personally, because that seems like pretty decent slash very good money for those, particularly when you consider their contributions in the league. I think Oliver Antman has the same amount of assists as Gassama, and Chermiti has 3-4 goals at the minute, albeit two of them in a really important game. So I was a bit surprised that it was deemed such a big risk for us to sell those players and try and bring other ones in. That being said, I am still happy with how the window went overall. I would have liked probably another option in the final third. But yeah, I was a bit surprised not to see any of those players last night, because some of those players we've mentioned have sort of proved that in domestic games they either aren't really involved, or when the big moments come, they don't deliver in a way that you really would want for the money that's been spent on them. So I sort of understood pre-match what the manager was saying around some of the players that have come in, have just arrived, maybe had a knock, maybe recovering from injury, maybe haven't played 90 minutes very often this season. But what I assumed was we would see those players early in the second half, and certainly the way that the game unfolded, I think there was a real opportunity to bring those players on, um, and we didn't, and we sort of reverted to let's see this out, which great when it works, and those are the margins. If that works, it's so great. What an absolutely fantastic victory it was. We were terrible, but we got through the game. One swing of a boot turns it into absolute disaster, and the manager was completely incorrect. That is the margins that we live in. and I think that's probably accurate from last night.
Yeah, the lineup was interesting to me because, and Rangers are teaching me to do this, by the way, that we can score really heavily in one game and then look completely lacklustre in the next. And that's not just to do with the Scottish Cup. You take, Easter Road and then, Kilmarnock and being able to then see as to how we can respond appropriately. But the benefit of playing Queen's Park last weekend was it allowed some of the new intake to get some game time. A couple of them, obviously, really impressive in terms of the performances, goals, etc. And I think the manager tried to look at future proofing a little bit towards this game and obviously Sunday in terms of his selection process. But you mentioned there the big chance that Chermiti had where there was just a foul up in the Motherwell defence. The ball kind of ricochets off him, is able to take control, and he did what I think we've seen far too often, which was he's got options to hit it to the left or the right keeper, and he lashes at it, hits it straight down the keeper's throat, not a problem. And that, again, like I say, is the fine margins that we spoke about, because I think a second goal really takes the wind out of the Motherwell sails, and then maybe then at that point we execute that game plan that Danny Rule had of, okay, let's sit in a little bit, let's contain. We know that Motherwell are extremely well coached. We know that they can pass accurately, which was something that Rangers completely fell away from in the kind of latter part of the first half and didn't really recover it for me in the second. That where we looked a slightly more clinical team in the kind of opening 10, 15 minutes of the game, and then we get the goal through some lovely play by Mo Diamandine and a great finish by Raskan. It just seemed to be the case that we felt, okay, well, the game only lasts 10 minutes, the job is done, not a problem. And I don't know if it's a mentality thing. I don't know if it's a lack of comfort. I don't know if we are nervous around this idea of, well, we've started well, we've taken the lead, what happens next? Because it was very similar to, I think, what we saw against Kilmarnock at Ibrox. The challenge for me, though, Adam, is it's not just, you can look at those fine margins in terms of the Chermiti chance, of course, but the amount of other players that I think, last night, especially being able to try and go forward, I thought Gassama was terrible. I thought Moore was terrible, and I take into account that the two of them were on some fairly hefty challenges, Moore in particular, that led to the red card for Fadinger. But you're asking these players to say, get yourself into a space where you know that you've got to be able to go out there and compete in a title race. I don't believe Motherwell involved in the title race. I know there's noise around that, but I don't think that's going to happen. But irrespective of that, they are a very, very good team in terms of when they have the ball and what they can do with it. And these players, for me, in terms of your core nucleus, never mind the new intake coming in, they're just not turning up for it. And I wonder, similar to the point that you made, did Danny Rule give them too long in the park?
Yeah, I would I would agree. I think the midfield three for me, I didn't disagree with it, but I think it signals how the game's going to go. I did wonder if Chukwani playing the full 90 minutes the game before meant that we might not go with that midfield three, but I was kind of all for it. But Diamandi pushing on is great, and he did so well for that goal. Didn't have the best of games after that, and the front three just don't give you enough goals and assists. I think that's apparent even if you look past the raw numbers. So when you boil that down, you're playing a very defensive setup with three players that probably won't come up with the goods domestically when you need it. So getting to halftime 1-0 up for me with all of that and how the game went and the saves that we had to make and the opportunities that Motherwell created, I thought that was job done in the sense of we got to halftime and now we can actually bring on some proper players that are going to let us play in the break, because it was all set up for us. Motherwell need to attack and we can hit them on the break. So the first half was what it was, but I could be all on board with that sort of rope-a-dope tactic. But yeah, it didn't really transpire that way.
No, it did not. The first sub was made just after the hour mark, and that's with Ryan Deary coming on for Mo Diamandi. I understood this substitution, Adam, from a non-tactical perspective, because Diamandi took a card in 15 minutes, and the way how the game was going, because it was a physical game, I don't think it was particularly well refereed. But at the same point, I could have understood it because I didn't want. I'm worried about Diamande in that regard. I think sometimes he can make challenges that can be late or they can be rash, and then he puts himself into contention to get dismissed. But I was pleased to see Nadiri coming on because obviously the big conversation prior to the game was who would start up front. For me, and I don't want to be unduly harsh on him, but I do think I've got evidence to back this up. I think we have two strikers. I can't count Miovski in that branch at the moment. And then I think the signal intent was further amplified by bringing Manny Fernandez on for JD Gassama. I think that this is where that pragmatism that you spoke about really shone through because Motherwell probably smelt blood. And there was a couple of decent saves by Jack Butland, and obviously Motherwell hit the post as well. But even within that, I think that you've got a stick or twist option. And I was disappointed to see that actually the manager wanted to kind of err on the side of let's just play it safe, let's see out the 1-0 and then let's take it from there. And I'm going to address something which I've kind of been thinking about since I heard these post-match comments as well, where he'd said that he probably would have taken a point before the game. I kind of understand the context of where he's trying to come from there. But what Rangers fans need to hear is that you can't be going to places like Falkirk, Motherwell, Easter Road and going to set up to think that a 1-goal lead for the vast majority of the game or that a point is going to be acceptable. It feels like as if he's just very hesitant to put his foot on the gas, and I think his lineup and his subs showed that. So he has to take a lot of responsibility for what ended up happening last night.
For sure. And I think, yeah, you can understand coming away from a difficult venue, getting a point would end up being fine, and it might end up being a great point in the run-in, but I just don't think there's any benefit of saying that, to be honest. I've not watched the full press conference back or anything like that, but I think he said something about taking both of these games together in terms of fitness, etc., which again makes sense in principle given the lineup that was played last night, but it was a weaker lineup last night than we played against Queen's Park in the Cup, with all due respect. So, yeah, there's things in there that don't quite tally up, and I get there's 3 or 4 days between them, and people could be injured. Nadiri had a knock and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, but I think he's been very, very good with the media. Really, really good actually. But there's just maybe one or two things that, even if it does end up being true, I don't know the benefit of saying it. Again, on the striker thing, I kind of take your point on Miovski, but I do think he needs a partner more than the other two do, and I it's very early days, but I can't see Nadiri and Chermiti being something that works together too often. I feel like they're both want to take up similar spaces. They're both going to be treated in the same way. They both want to drop in or run behind. Nadiri, hopefully, he certainly seems to be a better penalty box player than Chermiti is. So again, I was really surprised when the news was coming out of that. I assumed it was Chermiti being sold, Nadiri coming in, and hopefully bringing in someone else. But it seems to be both of them. But I would have said that Miovski is a better partner for both of them than either of them are, just in terms of skill sets, etc. So, not really something for last night, but it was a bit strange that Nadiri was the first sub and Chermiti sort of stayed on. I would maybe have been expecting a little bit more of a change, but as we've seen later on, there wasn't really any change at all, so maybe not.
No, I mean, he makes the substitutions, the remaining substitutions in the 86 minutes marked as a treble change. Asgard, Sterling and Miovski all coming on for Moore, Tavernier and Chermiti. I thought, as I say, Moore really, really poor. And Tav, I think James Tavernier has contributed across the course of the season, and I do appreciate that there's been an upturn. Obviously, gets a hat-trick against Queen's Park. He scored important penalties for us across the course of the last few weeks. You know, we've got Kelly, to score the opening goals, obviously the second goal up at Pataudry. So he definitely can play his part, but I think for me, what I'm expecting from James Tavernier now is that we'll get 60 minutes. So whether or not you want to do that for the first hour of the game or whether or not you want to bench him and then bring him on, then we can get a good solid 60 minutes out of him. Dejon Sterling, I think, obviously we know he's had some absences because of injuries come back in, and we have to effectively manage his minutes now. And Miovski, as you say, I think it's a fair point in terms of being able to try and have that partnership. The issue for me, though, at this stage was I thought he would make more subs on the hour mark based on what he was looking to be able to see. I wanted him to make subs, and I think you're in the same space. I wanted him to make subs at half time, but I can't really see the value of bringing some of these players on with 3, 4, 5 minutes left in the game. And then obviously a couple of minutes after this, Motherwell do equalise. Sterling, I personally think there's a little bit of a kind of push from Jagolson, gets the ball back across, and obviously, as fate would have it, Stephen Welsh that's able to score the equaliser. I still cannot get away from this idea that if we'd been able to change some of those subs up with 30 minutes left, even a good solid 15 to 20 minutes left, if we were then able to grab a goal with two strikers in the park, then we come away with 3 points. And I think it sets us up perfectly for Sunday. It's all ifs and buts and maybes, of course, but I think that for me is the really frustrating thing when I've looked back at the game and had a chance to rewatch it, coupled with this idea of, as I say, the poor passing. I just don't think we could control the ball well. Motherwell could do it far better than us. And it did feel, for me at least, from I think quite early on in the second half, because we hadn't made those changes, that the inevitable was coming.
Yeah, I think it's signals of intent for me. Motherwell had played their hand and brought on Björgolfsson, to give them a little bit more of a physical presence, I guess, up front. So I can see the logic of bringing on Fernandez and going to a 5 for sure. But as soon as that red card happens, for me that needs to disappear. So I would have had I'd have had Romans on earlier. I think because he's bigger than Magoma and can offer more of a threat. I think even in this early stage, certainly in terms of taking the ball and running, and certainly in the in our own box. But the pace that we had on the bench of players that are in playing well and in form. Oliver Antman's played well the last couple of games. We're managing minutes for players that are just back, but to me, as soon as that red card goes, a signal of intent would be bring off Moore and Chermiti, absolutely, but Scott Olsen and Antman going on then, because Motherwell came at us, we dropped back, we still stayed in the 5, even at 10 men, which I didn't agree with, as I said, and it's just a signal of intent. And then when you see Asgard, Majovski, and Sterling lining up to come on at 86 minutes gone, that to me is we are 100% hunkering down here, and Motherwell will see that as well. And Motherwell are able to throw on players that they think can help. I don't know for sure where the ball came in from, but I think it probably came from the left hand side, and maybe Regan Charles Cook sent that ball in. So it's all about intent. If we had players with pace on the break on the pitch at that point, Motherwell have to second guess themselves. And there was 20 minutes from the red card until the game finished, so there's plenty of opportunity for those players to come on and play. As we've seen in the last couple of games, those two players are definitely able to contribute in the final third, particularly with Nadiri. So seeing Asgard and Majovski coming on, to me, seems like we are just going to have bigger players on to defend set pieces again, and we're just going to hunker in. We won't offer anything on the break whatsoever. We've taken off all pace that we had, and we are just basically going to batten down the hatches. And I think that is most people's issue. Walking into that, knowingly and having 2 or 3 different opportunities to then change that, for me is a poor reflection, I think, on the manager's decisions, because that doesn't come down to what looking out for players for next week or anything like that. Because if you're saying that players can't play 15, 20 minutes or 15 minutes of a game, then they shouldn't really be on the bench, personally, and they therefore won't be fit to start the game at the weekend. So it's just what it represents. I think, for me, it represents we're just going to sit back and let Motherwell come on to us and try and see this out. And at 1-0, it's not the best move, even for a team that is looking a lot stronger defensively.
I think what I would have liked to have seen in terms of, you mentioned there about some of the players, Scovolson, being able to come on, Romans, Antman. I'm still I'm still trying to defend because I think you're right. I think he has shown an upturn, but he's had absences. I don't think his performances were great. I think Gassama has played a lot of football, but again, as I said at the top of the show, he was not contributing last night. But what I would have liked to have seen the minute that red card happens is, rather than hunker down as you suggest, is bring on those three players with pace. That even if we can't get a goal, because obviously at this point, if we decide to keep Chermiti on the park, then if we're still struggling to be able to at least get us up and been able to try and use the likes of Fernandez, who had come on a few minutes before the red, that if we can get up the park and then start winning corners, then we know that we can be a threat offensively from corners, even winning free kicks, which we did get quite a bit of. So did Motherwell as well. But again, I think that was partly because it was poorly refereed. But being able to try and utilise our set piece weapon would have been far more effective than being able to try and as I say, sit in a little bit. But you need pace to be able to get those guys up there. Gassama and Moore, for me, struggled to offer that. I think that we see the key attributes for Chermiti in being able to hold up the ball. Nadiri can get forward, as you say. He's keen to be able to do that. Even when he's won the ball, he with his back to goal, he does a 180 and he's heading straight towards the penalty box. But this is where we need to be smarter, where we can utilise those offensive options in terms of just getting us up there. And if we felt that we were under the cosh, and I'm not suggesting that we were, by the way, Motherwell played well, but we're not talking here about them completely battering our goal. All we needed was that killer second. And even if it just gets us up the park to run out the clock a little bit, I suppose really what I'm trying to say is you can defend a lead even by being pretty offensive and getting the ball forward than you can do by absorbing pressure.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think for me, Motherwell definitely had the better of the first half. I don't think that's a bold thing to say, but I do think we handled the first half hour of the second half really well. I thought our pressing was a bit more coordinated. I thought we limited them. They looked like they were sitting back a little bit. I actually hoped that they were. They sort of ran out of punch. But yeah, for me, it's the red card changes the game for both teams, and not in a good way for us. And I'm expecting us to readapt then.
Is it the case that what we probably saw last night from both teams is there's a degree of a risk reward element where Rangers feel precarious within a advantageous position, but Motherwell know 1 point could be as good as none, so we're as well going for it no matter what. And that's how both teams approach the game, and ultimately the outcome that we got to.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Yeah, for sure.
Well, as I say, we have to move on now to the first versus second game at Ibrox on Sunday. As I say, Adam, I think that it's been interesting to watch what's been happening with Hearts and with Celtic. We've obviously got a vested interest in them from the title run-in. And again, I think that the sting that we've felt across the course of the last couple of days, as I mentioned, was around their last-minute winners. I'll be honest with you, for Celtic at home, it just seems fairly inevitable. But we saw how that kind of came into it. And as I say, I watched the Edinburgh Derby. I didn't think it was a great game of football, to be honest with you, but Hearts were still able to get that last minute winner. And Hibs just couldn't get back into it because it was so late on in the clock. But what Danny Rule, for me, has to do now is look at how do we use the home advantage, because I think that we've got some real question marks over what we do away from home. So let's capitalise on the home games that we have. We know the post-split fixtures will not be kind to us. So he is going to have to reassess how he wants to be able to approach this game. And I'm hoping that we won't see those degrees of pragmatism. Hearts will come and they'll be very, very much up for it because this is a massive test for them. I still believe that Hearts won't win the league, but what they can do at the moment and the way how they're churning out results, it's kind of a similar position to where we've been previously, where results are all that matters. Performance can come a distant second, but Hearts have been hampered with the loss of Devlin, the loss of Shankland. We all thought, with interest, could that impact them? They've still been able to scrape by in some wins, but scrape is probably the word that I would use. They've had some tough games where obviously they've been down to 10, so they've had to kind of dip into quite a bit as well. Celtic will be different because they've obviously got their European campaign still to deal with, and I think that the Scottish Cup quarter-final will be very, very interesting to see as to the fallout of that. But looking ahead to Sunday, what are you hoping to be able to try and see in terms of some of the changes that we may make?
So I think results are obviously the most important thing, but I think last night just sums up my belief that there needs to be a consistent level of performance to go along with that, because last night was a game of margins for Rangers. We've came out on top of those margins at times where we've maybe got away with one and got a great set piece in, or a good finish, whatever that gets us over the line. And I think when you win a game, so if we'd have held out in that game, it would have been brilliant. What another step in the journey, great battle and display, all that sort of stuff. That's what results do to fans. That's how fans can veer from 0 to 100 on it. It's important to have that level of performance in the background, that if things aren't going your way, you still have a clear path that, okay, we've conceded that goal, let's go up the park and try and score again because we know we can do it. So I think that's where those two things collide. For me, I'm hoping there is a pattern there, like we said, the last three big away games, but I'm hoping that is because of the players that we have played in those games rather than the players that we have brought in or come back from injury. So I'm hoping that pattern shifts drastically. I think it needs to, because we can't just rely on, we've been saying this for a while, we can't just rely on having a much improved defence and set pieces. We have to start creating more high quality opportunities and more importantly finishing them. So I hope Sunday is the first step on that, if you like. I know things have been getting better, but I hope Sunday's the next step on improving that. I'm confident in that. I think we have signed some good players. They've made a good start. Hopefully they continue it. I liked some of the stuff that I've seen in the last two home games, certainly the second half Kilmarnock and the Queen's Park game. But ultimately it is just isolation just now, and we want to keep going. We've got a interesting run, shall we say, domestically, but we're down to one game a week pretty much from now, I think, other than one game, maybe two games towards the end of the season. So all those excuses, reasons, complications that managers have around don't have much time on the training pitch, players aren't fit, we have to manage this game, we have to manage that game, that is out the window now, as far as I'm concerned, for the next 3 months. Strongest team plays every game. If we know our strongest team, great. I understand we're still getting up to speed on that, but I don't think there can be much debate about that. There's no load management really needed outside of the usual niggles, injuries, all that sort of stuff. So I'm expecting us to see us come out and be more adventurous, be more clinical, play with more purpose. All those things that we've seen last weekend against, albeit a second division or a lower league opposition. And yeah, starting on Sunday would be huge. Go out there and get a statement victory. And maybe the manager, if we go out and get a statement victory, maybe the manager is not correct that a draw was a good result at Fir Park. But like I said at the start, maybe it might end up being a really useful point. But it's on Rangers to go and show that it could be a useful point by doing really well over the next few months.
I don't really know how best to phrase this, so I'm just going to kind of come out and say it because I'm really keen on your thoughts on this. From what you've seen from this Rangers team, and I understand the resurgence and the consistency in terms of what we've got, do you believe that this Rangers team believes that it can win the league?
It's really tough to judge because we don't have much history in terms of what we think this team will do. I see the same old tired cliches coming out about this is what this team does, etc. Even though we've obliterated the squad multiple times now since that cliche first came out. So I'd like to think so. I think that will be the conversation that's happening internally. The facts are we have been tough to beat. We have got a really good defensive record. We are really good on set pieces. If they now feel like they have added enough in the forward areas, then I don't see any reason why it's going to be. It's not as if we're up against a sort of all-conquering team that we know are going to win all the time. The conversation I just had there about performances being just as important as results applies to the other two teams as well, and I think they're in equally sketchy territory as far as that is concerned. So I think it's in anybody's hands. I think, as far as I'm concerned, but these next few weeks will tell us. I think, because if we get 2 wins in our next 2 home games against Hearts and Celtic, then I think it's anybody's, to be honest. So I would really hope that they're confident that they can go and do that.
The reason why I'm asking that question is because I think some of the conversations I've had with some of the other Rangers fans around, the you've got the traditional belief, right? Rangers should be able to go out. We should be able to make sure that we are competing, and I understand all of that. And the counter argument, I think, to that as well, we've been able to call our resurgence and been able to get back into a title race an achievement within itself, based purely on this season. I'm not talking about the history of Rangers. I'm not talking about previous league campaigns. I just mean in terms of where that's at. And the reason as to why I asked that question is because I suppose really what I'm in. Well, there's 2 key factors to it for me. I think that when you bring in players, as we have done across the January window, I think that you're bringing in quality. But I think you also want to be able to bring in players who will take the responsibility of saying, I didn't come here to come second or third, I came here to win. I see guys like Chukwani, who I know that you're also impressed with. I think we're absolutely both on the same page with that, because I really like his approach. I like his attitude. I thought he played well against Queen's Park, and I actually thought he was one of our better players at Fir Park, because he covers a lot of ground. He's strong. He can stand up to it. He can do all of those things. Nadiri, I'm encouraged by. Skov Olsen, I think, is bedding in and will rightly take a wee bit of time. Roman's exactly the same, because we've only really seen glimpses of these players. But the core element of the group that they've joined, I think that, and you know what it's like in any workplace, if you go in and you're all full of, you're in your early days onboarding period, and you go in and you're like, right, I'm going to go 100 miles an hour, but then you start to see that other teammates, other colleagues aren't in that same vein of passion to be able to deliver. I think it's a natural thing for you to be able to then start to step it down a bit. It's an exceptional person for me who wants to maintain that level of momentum irrespective of what's going on around them. But also what I found with those people is that by and large, they're typically winners. So this group, I think, it'll be very, very interesting to see if we can get that result against Hearts. Maybe that's the switch. Maybe that's the thing that then says to them, no, we are genuinely in this. Because I think that what I need to be able to see, and now I'm moving on, and I know we are one game at a time. You're absolutely correct when you say that. But again, thinking of that post-split fixture list, I'm thinking to myself, right, if we, when we go to Tynecastle and we go to Parkhead, we need to be able to make sure that we are also at that stage firing on all cylinders, because we believe that we can get the title. And I think Sunday will go a long way for me as a fan, but I'm hoping as the players to say, if we can do this and we can do it against Celtic at Ibrox in the league game, 100% we're getting into a much better position to win the league.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair again. And like I said, fingers crossed we can now go and make the most of this this next few weeks that we've got. There's some huge games in there, and if we can get our attackers on the pitch and get them, or new attackers on the pitch and get them firing, then fingers crossed we fall on the right side of the margins.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, we hope for these things to kind of come true, and it's a big responsibility, especially for some of the new players coming in. But I am confident that Danny Rule has said to them when we were in the recruitment phase and approaching them initially, we outlined those expectations, and the vision was there to be able to do it. So it is going to be over to Rangers, and I'm looking forward to Sunday's game. I know that everyone was really excited about the opportunity to go top of the league, but for me, Adam, I will absolutely take, as I'm sure you will, and everyone listening to this will, I will take being top of the league in May than being top of the league in February.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, folks, that will do us for this week. David will be back with you on Monday on Flagship to unpack the game at Ibrox against Hearts, and hopefully talking about a victory. Thank you to Mike Lee and Paul Myers. Thank you to you all for listening, but my special thanks this week has to go to my very special friend Adam Thornton, thank you very much for coming on, buddy. I hope you're feeling slightly better now that we've had a chance to unpack all of that.
Yeah, not really, but yeah, it was a thing that we did. No, thank you for having me on.
Okay, thanks so much for everyone for listening. If you want to hear more from us all, you can head on over to our site, patreon.com/heart and hand, where you'll get loads of great Daily Rangers content as well. So come on over and join us across there. Until then, we'll speak to you on Monday. Thanks so much now. Bye-bye.